So we have a very unequal situation in Haiti. When I travel to Haiti, I stay in Pétionville in a very nice hotel or bed and breakfast. It costs a little less than a hotel here in Washington, D.C., but not too much. If I want to go to the grocery, it not only has the same food and the same prices as here in Washington, but it even has the same name. It's called Giant. Well, Giant, but same thing, different chain. The conditions are very pleasant, air conditioning, and so on and so forth. If you go down the mountain to Port-au-Prince, pretty soon you come to the slums, the quartiers populaires, as they're called. And then if you go outside the city, very soon you have very different conditions. No electricity, no running water. People farming on about a hectare or less, so somewhere between 1 and 2 acres or even smaller plots. And in Haiti itself, one speaks of Mounandeo, which my friends recognize this term, the outsiders. So there has been this division throughout Haitian history between the city dwellers and the people in the countryside. And today, the people in the countryside are still the majority. Most of them live in poverty. Even a majority of them live in extreme poverty. They also are quite food insecure, a majority of Haitians' population. Even though in rural areas people are making their living with agriculture, they're also food insecure, something of a paradox. And they face very difficult conditions. Haiti, as you perhaps know, is on the main pathway for Atlantic hurricanes. As Prosperi already mentioned, people make their living in part by creating charcoal, so there's very serious deforestation. And so when those rains come, there are landslides and floods. There are also droughts. And we find, my good friend Senator Inhofe says there is no climate change, but if you talk to Haitian farmers, the rainfall patterns are changing, and this is affecting the conditions in the rural areas as well. So at least in Haiti, we have some pretty good evidence of the climate changing. So I am going to turn it over to our very distinguished panel. You've already heard from Prosperi, so I'm going to ask him to go last, and we will start with Marie-Ange Noël, who is from Jacmel. If you know Haiti, it's near the beach and the artist colony, but it's also an agricultural area. And then we'll hear from Fortuné Cherfrère. So he's my fortunate dear brother, is what his name is. And both of them have worked in the rural areas as community art organizers and trainers working with farmers. Marie-Noël is also involved in a women's rights organization. And Prosperi, his work, much of it is focused, I think, on the rural areas as well. So we have 3 Haitians who know Mounandeo, the outsiders, quite well. So I will turn it over to Marie-Ange.
Merci, Marc.
Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone.
Moi content, moi j'ai chance pour moi parler. Dans un mois côté n'a célébrer et bataille familiale.
I'm very happy that I get to speak in this month when we're celebrating the struggle of women,
Côté yo te raché en pile droit,
where they have worked so hard.
li bon pour nous faire un bilan pour nous ouais droit ça yo. Est-ce que nous jouis de yo, est-ce que yo là toujours et qui ça qui était pour nous faire.
It's good for us to stop and see what has happened, if women still have these rights, if they are still there, if they still need this work.
Yo nan droit nous gen jodi chance jodi a pour nous parler, c'est droit pour nous joindre manger. Est-ce que vraiment c'est ça nous va regarder là pour nous?
So one of the rights that we want to talk about today is the right to hunger, the right to food. Do we have this right?
Oui, on a parlé de sécurité alimentaire. Nous connaissons sécurité alimentaire. C'est là tout le monde, tout côté, économiquement, socialement, physiquement, joindre accès à une alimentation sécure.
It's when we have food security is when everyone everywhere can get what they need in terms of food for nourishment.
Et nutritive qui satisfait besoins yo, nutritionnellement,
Meet their needs nutritionally to meet their needs for food.
et qui permet de gagner une vie saine, une vie active.
So they can have an active and healthy life.
Ouais. Alors, si nous avons une question ça dans la trilogie,
So if we look at this question from its logic,
disponibilité aliments,
the availability of the food,
accessibilité aliments,
the accessibility of the food,
ration alimentaire,
and the rations, the food rations,
nous avons analysé la question comme ça.
then you can better analyze this question.
Nous remarquons que les femmes ont plus participé dans l'activité de production après le 12 janvier qu'avant.
After the 12th of January, we've noticed that women are more involved in this production of food.
Ça veut dire qu'ils sont plus motivés sur question de développement après le 12 janvier.
Since the 12th of January, they are more motivated in this question of development.
Et tendance ça, ils remarquent que chaque Haïtien après le 12 janvier.
And we see this in the case of every Haitian since the 12th of January.
En pile jeune fille qui te prendre plus fait de nos métiers traditionnels, mais je ne veux dire en mes développement moi-même tout rentrer là-dedans.
Many young women who we see, or girls who, since the 12th of January, are saying, let's not just stay in traditional female roles, but let's get into building up Haiti in many different professions.
Exemple, nous avons parlé de production agricole, côté tout le monde essaie de faire un petit jardin là pour la caillou.
We can talk about agriculture production, where everybody is trying to have a little garden in their backyard.
Yo arrivé participer en pile dans question fertilité.
They are also participating in the questions of fertility of the soil.
Et nous croyons que dans deux entreprises, dans l'élevage, yo antigen mettez main.
And in businesses with raising animals, farm animals, they are also more involved.
Mais nous connaissons que, je ne veux dire, si on a parlé de sécurité alimentaire, il y a un bagage qui vient avec, c'est qui ça nous produit?
There's another issue that's connected with this whole question of food security. It is, what is it that we're producing?
Là, nous connaissons la majorité ça consommer, c'est des bagages qui partent que nous-mêmes, nous pas que la caille, c'est des bagages qui sont aussi dans l'autre pays, comme c'est nous-mêmes ou bien l'autre pays.
We realize that most of the things that we are consuming are products that we do not produce ourselves. They are imported from other countries.
Là, nous connaissons question ça, tu as supposé marier avec côté un bon réforme agraire, côté pour nous joindre terre pour le travail.
So we know that this is all connected to the need for a good agricultural reform so that people can find the land they need for agriculture.
Là, nous regardons les journées d'aujourd'hui, c'est dans le système archaïque là. On a fonctionné dans le système archaïque là.
We see now that we're living with an archaic system. When I say archaic system, I mean.
Joujou les aujourd'hui, pour mon travail terre, c'est avec pas de machines qui collaborent.
Today, when people are working the land, there are not machines with which they can do their work.
C'est sous la pluie, les saisons à planter, à compter.
So it's just when it rains in that season, you plant.
Pas gagner semence qui disponible.
There is not seed that is available.
Et manquer matériel, pas gagner outils. Alors tout encadrement ça, technique ça, nous pas gagner pour nous travailler.
So there's not material, there are not tools, all that kind of technical framework is not there to help with the farming.
Alors, nous demandons dans niveau ça, qui ça nous a produit?
So we're asking at this level, what can we produce?
Oui, alors nous voulons dire que la situation ça n'a pas lié à la générale, mais il y a encore plus vulnérable pour famille.
We see that this situation in general is very more difficult, but even more so for the women.
Parce que famille eux-mêmes travail ça n'a pas lié, lever qui quoi, sepet, etc. Longtemps, pour te prendre le monde qui t'a aidé au faire jardin pour eux, je ne veux dire c'est eux-mêmes pour continuer à faire ça.
All of this kind of work that we see today, women are now doing for themselves, jobs like working in their garden and planting their crops that they used to have other people do, now they themselves are doing it.
Si moi-même, l'aime l'école, maman, papa, c'était un contre travail, pour voir l'école, je ne dis à petit paysan, pas de chance.
Even myself, my mother and father worked the land so that they could send me to school. Today we see that young people in peasant societies are not having the chance that I had to even go to school.
Et manger autour, c'est des produits vraiment, en pile nan yo, c'est de bagaille organique, ça c'est de conséquences peut-être déjà nous regarder. Comme conséquence, ou voyez que les conséquences avec qualité n'a manger qui permettent que mon yo pas gagner une bonne santé.
Problem that we have with the things that are produced, we have the problem that they are not organic. So the things that they do get to eat that are available are not giving them good health.
Ça fait que si moun yo par exemple qui te connaît aller l'école, qui te connaît bien change, un plat chaud le matin pour manger, yo pas capable rien dans l'éducation parce que moun yo pas le grand goût, pas capable.
We see children who don't have they don't have the chance of having a good breakfast in the morning before they go to school. They come to school and hunger keeps them from being able to learn. You can't learn when you're hungry sitting in class.
Ça fait que en pile si jeune fille peut-être plat manger, yo obligé à vendre quoi yo parce que faut pour manger, yo dit moun qui grand goût pas jour.
So we also see with young girls that in order for them to find the food that they need, they have to sell their bodies. We see that when you can't go out and do other things when you're hungry.
Oui, alors, n'importe où pour nous dire, après 5 années, nous remarquons que production, ça nous produit, il baisse en pile de année en l'autre.
We see that in the last 5 years, the production has been going down from one year to the next.
Avec sécheresse que nous gagnons pendant 2 dernières années, ça y est, avec changement climatique.
And adding to that, the drought that we've had for the last 2 years and the effects of climate change.
En plus de ça, femmes n'ont pas tellement accès.
And in addition to that, the women really don't have too much access.
Ni avec manger pour manger.
Nor to the food.
Yo pas de pouvoir d'achat.
They don't have power for buying.
Yo dans chômage.
They are unemployed.
Pas d'alternative économique.
They don't have economic alternatives.
Pas d'accès projet crédit pour les femmes.
They don't have credit options for women.
En façon pour lutter contre l'insécurité alimentaire.
In order to struggle against this insecurity, this food insecurity.
Oui, nous pensons que le gouvernement dit qu'il fait un peu d'effort.
We think that the government says they're making a great effort.
Effectivement, ils ont créé un petit programme.
And it's true, they've created many small programs.
Soulager la misère, aider peuples, un petit programme.
To ease this misery, to help the people, many programs.
Mais qui est-ce qui bénéficie des programmes ça?
But
Qui j'en ai aidé? Est-ce que vous dites comment c'est de bagages pour un jour?
How are they helping people? Who is it that they're helping? Is it help for one day or is it something sustainable?
By le monde, yon 2 livres du riz, yon paquet spaghetti, yon petit bidon d'huile. Est-ce que ça a aidé dans la sécurité alimentaire?
Giving somebody 2 pounds of rice, a packet of spaghetti, and a bottle of oil, does that really increase food security?
Nous reconnaissons tout l'effort que le gouvernement américain fait pour aider dans la sécurité alimentaire.
We recognize the efforts that the U.S. government is making to help with food security.
Nous disons merci pour ça.
And we are very grateful for that. We say thank you.
Mais est-ce que pas qu'il y a notre stratégie, notre approche de utiliser?
But isn't there another strategy, another approach that they could use to get to this goal?
Tant qu'on subventionne dans le premier temps, produits nous gagnons, qu'on y baisse la vie chère pour capable apporter de tout le monde.
How about helping with local production so that the cost of living could go down?
Parce que pour nos produits, ça prend au moins 3 ans, 5 ans pour vraiment nous résoudre le problème de sécurité alimentaire là.
For us to be able to increase this production, it might take 3 to 5 years for us to really have an impact on food security.
Est-ce que, journée aujourd'hui, pas de possibilité pour nous mettre pour femmes paysans et j'en ai parlé de moyens pour le travailler à bien.
Could there be some assistance for helping these women so that they could learn better methods to work the soil?
Est-ce que pas avoir des systèmes d'irrigation journée aujourd'hui qui pour permettre que nous récolter tout le temps sans nous pas obliger de tendre et la pluie tomber?
Could there be some systems of irrigation so that people could cultivate at all times without having to wait until the time of the rains?
Tout ça c'est le bagage pour construire.
These are the things that need to be built.
Faut qu'il y ait une politique pour sécurité alimentaire pour nous venir dans ça.
There has to be a policy for food security so that we can get to this point.
Nous voulons dire tout, sécurité alimentaire, est mariée avec pauvreté qui gagne dans le pays.
It's also true, we must say, that this food insecurity is married to the poverty that is in our country.
Jour en jour, mon yo vin pi pauvre et au moins c'est plus femmes qui pi pauvre.
From day to day, people are becoming poorer, and we see that it is women who are the most in poverty.
Pauvreté ça pas aidé mon avancé, au contraire, il fait pays a fait bac malgré toute aide que Haïti joine, mais Haïti toujours été dans un pays qui pi pauvre.
All of this aid that comes in does not seem to help Haiti to advance. In contrast, it is going back, it is receding, in spite of all this aid that is poured into the country.
Pauvreté ça engendre en pile violence la caille femme yo.
And this poverty brings in many different kinds of violence into the homes of and the lives of women.
Et parce que dans situation promiscuité mon yo arrivant, laisse ça pas gain vraiment un contrôle de l'État, mon yo victime en pile.
In the promiscuity that is rampant in our country, there is not any kind of control from the state and people become victimized.
Li marié tout avec les moun nan pa gen kob. Non seulement pour le docteur pour manger, même yo pa gen kob tout pour défendre tête yo devant la justice.
We see people who are lacking the money that they need for food, for health, but they also don't have the money that they need to defend themselves in the judiciary system.
Et c'est pour ça nous encourager en pile organisation institution de une façon c'est vrai nous connaît en pile dans le travail avec le gouvernement américain mais il y a des institutions des ONG qui souterrain tant pour AWS par exemple tant pour IA tant pour pile l'autre qui travaille en Haïti qui ont même à l'équipe mondiale dans base là.
We would like to encourage the international organizations. We know that many of them are helping at a certain level, but we appreciate those who work at more of a grassroots level. We name AJWS, yeah, and others who are working more at a grassroots level.
Organisation ça yo un travail bien spécial ensemble avec organisation souterraine qui rive loin dans le monde.
And we see these organizations working on the ground and reaching far into the hills of Haiti.
Mais ça, c'est moun yo qui mette men en pat là pour yo connaître qui ça y a fait.
And these are people who are not afraid to put their hand into the dough and they know what they're doing.
Femme yo créé en pile activité tant pour de bagaille tant pour tiers solidarité pour faire face.
There are many activities that the women are doing to create solidarity.
Yo fait de entreprise pour transformer produits yo ou bien pour faire élevage.
They have projects where they are transforming their circumstances. They are raising animals, or farm animals, livestock.
Pendant yo continue à demander pour yo gain terre pour une réforme intégrée qui fait dans le pays ça.
And they're asking for land. They're asking for agricultural reform in our country.
Alors, nous pensons que,
So we think,
et malgré tout effort que nous fait pour impliquer dans la production agricole là,
in spite of all the efforts that women are putting into changing agricultural production, improving it,
parce que yo manque information avec connaissance examen nutrition,
because they lack information and training, for example, in nutrition,
si pas une sensibilisation massive
if there's not a massive sensitization
qui fait sous valorisation production yo ya consommer yo,
that values the production of the products that they're consuming,
femme a toujours perdant.
women will always be the losers.
Pour qui ça me dit ça? C'est parce que mesdames yo ont tendance, par exemple, yo
Have a tendency, for example,
produit œufs pour le payo,
they produce eggs from their chickens.
yo préfère vendre ni pour yo acheter l'autre œuf qui est importé.
They prefer to sell those and then they buy other eggs that are imported.
Yo vend chadek yo pour y aller acheter jus qui est importé.
They sell their own grapefruit and then they go out and buy imported juice.
Alors, nous ne pouvons pas parler de sécurité alimentaire, les par exemple production par nous, pas valorisée.
We can't talk about or food security if our local products are not valued.
Nous ne pouvons pas parler de sécurité alimentaire, les tout ça n'a consommé à produire la caille.
We can't talk about this food security if the products that we consume all are not coming from within our country.
Et c'est pour ça qu'on a dit investir dans les femmes paysannes.
So we say invest in women, peasant women,
C'est eux-mêmes qui moteur le développement.
because they are the motors of development.
C'est eux-mêmes qui développent l'économie.
They are the ones who discovered the economy.
Ils disent que c'est une force
They are a force,
et ils doivent ça, ils doivent jouer pour tout.
and these rights that they have, they should enjoy them in every place.
Merci.
Merci, Anne. So, there's a saying in Haiti, women are called the cotomiton, the central pillar of the household, of the society, and their roles in the rural areas include marketing, not only farming, but marketing, the so-called Madame Zara, is how wholesaling and retailing is done in Haiti. I neglected to mention a couple of things when we started. First of all, I'd like to thank our translator, Sylvia Shirk, who is jumping amongst actually 3 languages. There's a little bit of French occurring here along with the Creole and New York. She also speaks that. Also, I would like to thank Congresswoman Barbara Lee very much for the use of the hall, as it were. And Mariage raises a very important question when we talk about food security in Haiti. So a lot of Haiti's food, most of it, 80% or so, is imported. So people eat a lot of rice in Haiti, and they eat what they call riz Miami. That's imported rice. It's actually more from Arkansas than Florida, but anyway, Miami's nearby. And then there's riz national. So if you ask people in Haiti, in all walks of life, which do you prefer? Oh, riz national, it looks better. The local rice, it looks better, it tastes better, it smells better. What do you buy? Riz Miami, it's cheaper. Supply and demand. So, as we know, the rice produced here in the United States is subsidized. Plus, Haiti has a 3% tariff. So if you want to bring basmati rice into the United States, the tariff is higher than 3%. If you want to sell rice from Arkansas to the Dominican Republic, remember that's the other side of the same island, 20% tariff. But in Haiti, 3%, close to zero. So in order to nurture Haitian farmers with this cheap and subsidized stuff coming in, not just from the United States, but from Brazil, from Vietnam, etc., it's hard for them to compete. So that's, I think, one of the very important points Marie-Ange was sharing with us. So now I will, without further ado, turn it over to Cher Frère, who has worked with the farmers' co-ops in Haiti. There's a lot of cooperatives at the local level, and I think he'll be telling us about that, amongst other things.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone.
Je tiens son plaisir
A real pleasure for me today
pour vous présenter paysans exactement qui n'a pas
to represent these peasants who actually are working the land.
Et pour commencer d'Acadie, nous,
I'd like to say, as I begin here,
tout le monde a droit pour manger sur ça.
everyone in this world has a right to food.
Manger pas des luxe.
Food should not be a luxury.
Ça veut dire si manger son lit, son parti moun k'ap manger, non parti moun k'ap manger.
If food is a luxury, that means that some people will eat and others will not eat.
Ça pour ces idées en Haïti en 80 jusqu'à l'arrivée 90, 90, 91, téléphone c'est un luxe.
But what happened in Haiti, as we see starting in 1980 and 1990, eating has become a luxury.
Et qu'on y a téléphone vient pas pour ça. Téléphone vient
Oh,
pas
I'm
pour
sorry.
ça.
Telephone became a luxury also.
C'est même gens qui a fait comparaison ça de manger.
And we compare these kind of amenities with food.
Là on a parlé de insécurité alimentaire.
And we're talking with food insecurity.
Avec nous qui nous travaillons, nous considérons comme agriculture sont source de développement durable.
We consider agricultural development to be a source of sustainable development.
C'est ça fait toute activité agricole qu'a fait dans nos pays, il repose sur l'agriculture.
Every kind of reform of development that is happening in a country is resting on the work of agriculture.
C'est ça fait que il y a un proverbe créole qui dit si moun en dehors pas descend, moun la vie va manger.
There's a Creole proverb that says, if the people from outside Andeo, as you said, don't come down, people in the city down there won't have food.
C'est ça fait avec coopérative agricole qui travaille avec nous, nous-mêmes c'est entrepreneurs.
So I tell the people in the cooperatives where I work, I say, you are the business people.
Pour qui ça me dit entrepreneur?
Why do I say this about them?
Parce qu'il y a produit pour tout le monde manger.
Because they are producing the food to allow everyone to eat.
Et nous considérons même comme premier fournisseur dans la production.
And we consider that they are the first suppliers of this production.
Et nous disons encore, eux-mêmes, yo cap, by un pile revenu, mettez mon travail, puis il y a un pile revenu qui est capable de travailler là-dedans.
And we say that they can generate a lot of revenue, give people work, and they can generate revenue for working the land.
Et yo cap créer emploi.
And they can create employment.
Ça veut dire si yo créer emploi, y a créer emploi yo dans milieu rural.
And if we say that they can create employment, they can create this employment in the rural areas.
Et là nous regardons bien, là on a parlé de sécurité alimentaire, nous voyons que les paysans sont plus victimes de l'insécurité alimentaire.
And yet we see that it is the peasants themselves who are some of the most victims of food insecurity.
Parce que yo gen pile obstacle pour yo produire.
Because they have so many obstacles to their production.
Parce que yo pa gen route.
There are no roads.
Là nous parlons de route agricole.
When we talk about roads, we talk about agricultural roads.
Yo pa gen accès à crédit.
They have no access to credit.
Là nous parlons de crédit agricole.
We talk about agricultural credit.
Et c'est un bagage tout gouvernement en Haïti ou bien institution financière ou whatever, yo pa investir dans l'agriculture, yo investir dans le crédit agricole.
But we see that government and financial institutions in Haiti, none of them seems to be ready to invest in agricultural credit.
Et tout autant que nous-mêmes nous pas investir dans l'agriculture, manger pas jamais ça.
So we know that for as long as we are not ready to invest in credit for agricultural ventures, food insecurity or hunger will not be diminished.
Nous avons toujours été dans l'insécurité alimentaire.
We will still be in food insecurity.
C'est ça fait que nous dit à la ronde badin faut que nous investissions dans l'agriculture pour que l'agriculture ait une force dans le pays côté n'a vie.
And so we continue to say that we must invest in agricultural work so that agricultural development can be the foundation of the future of our country.
Parce que nous dit paysans qui savent c'est produit pour améliorer la vie.
We tell our agricultural workers that their production is what will increase their livelihood.
Et si on produit bien, il a bien mangé, il a voué Timounio l'école, il a fait toute une série d'activités qui vous permettent que Timounio vive à l'aise.
And we tell them if they do this work well, they will have food to eat, they will be able to send their children to school, and their children will be able to grow up with more advantages.
Ça nous remarque encore dans la question agriculture.
Something else that we noticed in this question of agriculture,
Un paysan qui a produit la terre,
a peasant who's working the land.
il ne pas intégrer petit lié dans la production terre.
They don't want to get their children involved in the production of their land.
Il dit ça pour métier pour apprendre.
They say that's not a profession for them to learn,
Parce que il voit que il pas de rendement là.
because they see that they're not getting much profit out of it.
Il veut faire Timounio aller étudier l'autre profession.
So they want to get their children to go and study another profession.
Au lieu que il était dans la moitié pour capable faire.
Instead of having them stay in working the land and making food.
Et ça qui vient encore, en pile jeune fille, jeune garçon là qui en Haïti, épisode rural là commence à étudier, mon yo pas rester en section communale encore.
What we see with many of the young women and the young men in the rural areas of Haiti, there is this exodus toward the city. The young people don't want to stay in the rural areas of Haiti.
Soit y aller dans ville qui tout près yo,
Maybe they go to a city that's nearby.
soit y aller Saint-Domingue,
Maybe they go to the Dominican Republic,
soit yo vivent dans pays les États-Unis.
or they go to the United States.
Ça c'est un danger.
It's a danger.
Et danger ça, nous-mêmes qui travaillons avec les gens, il faut que nous soulevions ça pour que nous investissions plus dans l'agriculture.
And this is something that we who work with the agricultural sector need to keep telling people, that they have to invest in agriculture.
Et si nous investissons dans l'agriculture, il y a un changement total capital dans le pays d'Haïti.
And if they invest in agriculture, there will be a capital change in the agriculture, the economy of Haiti.
Parce que nous disons que l'agriculture a son force liée,
Because we say agriculture is a real force in
son
our country.
matrice liée dans le développement.
It is a very important part of our development of our country.
C'est ça qui permet de nous donner une bonne agriculture et de nous changer le climat et l'insécurité dans le monde.
And we believe that this can lead to better development within agriculture and have a change in the climate of the whole world.
Nous avons deux bagages à regarder, nous avons négligé dans la question agriculture.
We see two things that have been neglected in this whole area of agriculture.
Il y a un aspect, il y a l'aspect social là,
First, social.
il y a un aspect, il y a l'aspect économique là,
Second is the economic aspect.
il y a un aspect, il y a l'aspect solide.
And the other one they call the solid aspect.
Et nous combler ça en dans la communauté qui travaille là.
And we bring these together in the community where we're working.
Nous disons, il y a un peu de monde dans la communauté ça,
We say there are a lot of people in this community,
mais il manque un bagage.
but there's something that's missing.
Il y a pas de comme dans mais il faut faire agriculture.
They don't have money in their hands to be able to do agriculture work.
Manque crédit pour que yo même yo vivent d'agriculture.
They have to have credit. They don't have credit in order for them to live from this agricultural work.
Et aspect solide là,
And this aspect of solid,
c'est là où ils vont dans la communauté, ils jouent tout, ils jouent l'école, ils jouent la santé, ils jouent toute une gamme d'activités qui permettent que la communauté aille bien.
so when they come, they have all they need all this. They need schools. They need health services, so that this community can actually function.
Et si la communauté s'est bien, on ne va pas déplacer, quitter une zone.
And if it's working well, people aren't going to leave.
Et c'est ça que après le tremblement de terre, on lance un message parce que nous avons des chances de venir ici.
They know.
Nous lançons un message parce que nous avons des chances de venir ici.
After the earthquake, I sent out a message because I had the opportunity to come here.
Nous avons dit, son chance que nous gagnons pour que décentralisation nous fasse dans le moment ça.
Well, I said it was a real opportunity that we had at that time to decentralize in this moment right after the earthquake.
Parce que pour moun yo pas sorti en dehors de la ville.
Because people were not coming from the outside to come toward the city.
Parce que toute organisation te fait yo cri dans Port-au-Prince, tout porte boué dans Port-au-Prince, tout le monde en dehors.
And there was a lot of noise in Port-au-Prince about leaving people on the outside there.
Et c'est ça que je vous dis à toute organisation qui a visité Port-au-Prince ou après route nationale, la Titaï est une zone marginale, tellement de tika, tout le monde sont en dehors de la ville.
So we see a lot of people that came when you go to visit the national route along the going out from Port-au-Prince in Haiti, you see this area called Titayan, where a whole lot of people have poured in from other areas and created this new little village.
C'est là nous parler, nous toujours parler avec paysans, nous dit yo même c'est pour yo quoi dans tête yo côté à vivre dans la communauté.
We tell people in the rural areas to believe in themselves, where they're living, in their rural community.
Sous question manger c'est nous qui pour produire pour que yo mettre tête yo.
We tell them on the question of food that they can produce so that they can be their own masters.
Pas quoi dans monde qui produit manger nous chaque jour, chaque heure, chaque 2 mois, chaque 3 mois.
Don't believe in this idea of people that are going to bring us food every day, every hour, every week.
Quoi dans production.
Believe in your own production.
Et comme ça n'a descendre la richesse.
And that is how we are going to bring down the cost of living.
Pour aller plus loin, non,
Going a little further in this area,
non. Organisation que nous travaillons là,
the organization where I'm working,
nous avons 3 gros bagages nous fait là.
3 principal things that we're working on.
Nous croyons dans la formation paysan,
We believe in training peasants.
nous croyons dans la sensibilisation paysan,
We believe in conscientization of these peasants.
et nous croyons dans l'action que nous avons menée sur le terrain.
And we believe in the actions that we're taking on the ground.
Et là, nous faisons 3 bagages,
And when we do all 3 of these things,
ils vont suivre que nous avons fait avec les paysans.
there will be a follow-through that we will do with the peasants.
Nous ne faisons pas faire projet pendant 3 ans, 4 ans, 5 ans, nous l'aguer.
We don't do a project for 3 or 4 years and then just let them go.
Nous toujours à assister.
We're always there to assist them.
Comment ça y est?
How's it going?
Comment ça nous déboule? Comment ça y est? Comment ça marche?
With that thing that we brought you, how's that going? How's it working?
Et là, ça n'a pas comment va y.
And then we'll see how things are.
Et là, ça nous pas demander, nous pas faire votre projet avec.
And then we're not afraid to ask, we're not afraid to do new projects with them.
Parce que vous venez mettre terrain.
Because they have become the masters on the ground there, of their land.
Et nous pas besoin quoi, nous dit les fois activité, nous dit c'est eux qui pour mettre activité là, c'est pas nous qui mettre activité.
So when we have an activity, we say it is them who have to do this activity. They have to do this, not us. We are not doing this activity.
Nous pas de porter rien mal,
We're not bringing anything to them.
mais nous chita ensemble pour nous faire activité ensemble.
We sit together with them to do this activity together.
Et c'est idée qui pour passer.
And it's their ideas that
Et
get passed.
c'est force développement ça.
And that is the strength of development.
N'a pas de plus loin encore dans la question sécurité alimentaire.
Talking a little bit more about this idea of food security,
Gouvernement américain
the government of the United States
avec gouvernement haïtien,
and the Haitian government,
ils ont une belle politique en sécurité alimentaire.
they have a great policy of food security.
Mais qui est-ce qui a mené question ça sur le terrain?
But who is going to carry out this program on the ground?
Qui organisation qui a mené?
What organization would do it?
Parce qu'il y a une organisation qui paraît brusquement dans la sécurité alimentaire ou dit m'a fait sécurité alimentaire.
There are some organizations that show up suddenly and they say, oh, we're going to do food security.
Il va faire sécurité alimentaire.
They don't do
Il
food
fait
security.
assistance.
They
Nous
have-
portons assistance.
They bring an aid, they
On
bring a help
discute
for just a short period of
l'équipe
time.
agricole.
And that it's not sustainable.
Dans le nord-ouest,
In the Northwest,
dans la Tigonie,
in the
je
Artibonite,
m'ai assisté à une organisation qui a fait sécurité alimentaire.
I found a lot of organizations that said they were going to
Et
do food
pourtant,
security.
il ne va pas faire rien.
Actually, they didn't do anything.
Il ne va pas faire rien.
They didn't do nothing.
Et les gens m'ont regardé, ils ont une grosse machine, ils ont plus d'employés, plus de staff, plus de social mobilisé, et pourtant, il n'y a rien.
They have a lot of people, they have these great machines that they bring in, and we see that actually they're doing nothing.
Après 3 mois, 5 mois, je tourne dans la même situation.
And in 3 to 5 months, the same
Nous-mêmes,
situation has returned.
nous-mêmes, nous avons la sécurité alimentaire.
We don't see food security that way.
C'est ça fait qu'il a fait quelques recommandations
So we have some recommendations
dans la question de sécurité alimentaire.
in the area of food security.
Quelle que soit l'organisation qui a planté dans la sécurité alimentaire,
Any organization that starts to work in food security,
il faut louer ça une infrastructure agricole.
they have to pay attention to agricultural infrastructure.
Il faut louer ça conscientisation et formation petits paysans.
They have to look at areas of conscientization and training for the small farmers.
Ça yo li nèg nan monde.
That the people that they call the guys out in the mountains.
Faut yo créer ça yo li route agricole.
They have to be able to create agricultural roads.
Faut yo li ça yo créer aménagement bassin versant yo.
So they have to be able to manage the floodplains
En amont et en aval.
in the heights of the hills and down in the valleys.
Parce qu'on va pas faire une activité pour dire m'a commencer activité en bas pour monter.
You can't start and say, oh, I'm going to start in the lower areas and then I'm going to go up.
It's not a luxury.
L'organisation encore, toute organisation qui a parlé de sécurité alimentaire, ils ont négligé ça, la conservation de sol.
Many of these organizations that you see, they're talking about food security and they don't pay attention to soil conservation.
Faut garder, faut capable traiter aménagement versant yo qui pour permettre nous de produire plus pour ba manger.
You have to think about managing the soil in order to make it productive for food security.
Yon l'autre beau bagage encore moun yo négligé de parler sur ça et madame Noël de parler sur ça.
Another thing that they seem to neglect, and I spoke about it, Mrs. Noel spoke about it also,
Et ça qui plus fort nous plus fort dans la question sécurité alimentaire, sécurité agricole.
and one of the most important things in the whole area of food security is agricultural credit.
Ça pas de négligence là.
There is no negligence about
Parce
that.
que paysans yo pas de accès à crédit avec ça les institutions financières yo. La banque yo pas de accès à ça.
These farmers have no access to credit through institutions, financial institutions, the bank. They don't have access to that.
C'est ça fait là nous vivons dans communauté,
So when we get into these
nous
communities,
conscientiser yo
we make them aware of these
et nous
things.
faisons mettre propre entreprise yo sous pied que les chemètres.
And so we create businesses and we
Chemètres.
okay. Make something that belongs to them. You are in the home of the master. You are in the home of the mistress.
Ça veut dire, il y a des coopératives que nous travaillons avec, c'est en tant que communauté à même yo jeune crédit, sans qu'il n'y ait pas besoin de placer à l'autre côté.
And we make it possible for them to get this credit within their own community so that they don't have to go somewhere distant to get this credit.
Et c'est pas nous-mêmes qui gérons le crédit pour eux.
And we do not manage this credit for them.
C'est eux qui gèrent avec.
They are managing their own affairs.
Ça veut dire qu'ils croient dans ça.
And so they can believe in these things.
Ils participent dans ça.
They participate.
Ils mettent tout ça ensemble dans ça.
And they put everything that they have together.
C'est ça fait pas de doute.
And so they're not in doubt about it.
C'est ça fait qu'ils ont confiance
They can trust it
dans l'organisation qui est là.
in that organization where they're working.
Tout le monde parle encore de réforme agraire.
Another thing that's important is agricultural reform.
Ils doivent rentrer dans ces sécurité alimentaire.
So when you start talking about food
Faut
security,
qu'on entre dans technique.
there needs to be a technical accompaniment.
Parce que les nous regarder, il y a un gros projet. Parce que je regarde dans le nord, il y a un gros projet, 4 projets, USAID a fait, sont gros.
When I look at some of the projects in the north, for example, these big, huge projects that USAID is doing, big projects.
Je suis avec eux, je me dis les projets, ça sont belles projets.
So I sit with them and I say, oh, that's a very nice project you have
Et
there.
malheureusement, après 3 ans, la
Ouais.
fini.
But after about 3 years,
Et
it's
tout
going to
ça
be
dans
done.
la loi, il va faire rien. Tout à fait.
And everything that you brought, nothing's going to be left, everything's going to be swallowed up.
Bon, l'autre bagage, regardez, il faut gagner un document pour jouer là, pour des suivis là.
So in the documents that you look at with these projects, you have to see where is the follow-up.
Même si le projet a fini,
Even if that project is
mais il faut
finished,
toujours passer pour un discours comment le projet a parlé.
but you have to come back and make a visit and you have to ask them, how is the project doing?
C'est ça qui force sécurité alimentaire.
And that's another strength
Dans
of
toutes les recommandations, ça.
food security and these recommendations.
C'est ça fait, là nous travaillons avec les paysans, nous disons paysans, il y a 3 autres bagages pour faire encore pour nous leur produire. Pour qui ça va produire? Il faut poser la question, pour qui ça va produire?
When we visit with the peasants, we ask them a number of questions, and one of them we ask, for whom are you producing?
Comment on va produire?
How are you producing?
Et pour qui marché va produire?
And for what market are you producing?
Parce que paysan va des marchés, ils vendent produit même si
Luani?
ils vont des marchés, ils vendent produit.
So too often, most of these farmers, they don't really have a market for the things that they're producing.
Ils sont bataille à faire avec des paysans, l'organisation pour chercher marché, pour écouler produit.
And that is a struggle that we are carrying out with these agricultural producers, these farmers, so that they can have a market for the things that they're producing.
C'est ça fait n'importe organisation qui a rentré dans la sécurité alimentaire.
So any organization that's working in food
C'est pas
security,
garantir sur les vailles des vailles.
you can't just come into this in an ambiguous way.
Au lieu d'améliorer la situation,
Either you have to,
vous venez aggraver la situation.
you are either improving things or you are making things worse.
C'est ça fait que nous disons aujourd'hui son gros panel de questions d'emploi qui vont assister.
So today it's a very important panel that you're attending on this whole question of food security.
Merci un peu parce que nous faisons.
Thank you for listening to me.
Merci un peu, Chef. And this presentation has brought up, I think, a couple of important points. First of all, he spoke about the cooperatives of farmers, and when you learn about agriculture in Haiti, they say there's two things you need to know: la cour and combi. So it's the extended family and the cooperatives, and there is a very strong social aspect. It's sometimes said here in Washington we have to turn agriculture into a business and get rid of this social aspect, but as he also mentioned, right after the earthquake, there was a huge exodus from the earthquake zone, and primarily, that was not exclusively urban, but primarily urban, to the rural areas. And very poor and vulnerable households in the rural areas shared their food, shared their shelter. When they ran out of food, they shared the seeds. The people escaping the earthquake and the families in the rural areas ate seeds at one point. But if you ask people, well, why didn't you throw these people out? It's, well, they're my family, they're my friends, they're the people who take care of me when I have a problem. So he also points to, I think, a great strength in Haiti, that people do have this practice of sharing with family and friends in times of need. So without further ado, you've already heard from Prosperi, and he will take up the theme of this panel now.
Thank you very much, Mark. We had some good presentation from Marie-Ange and Chauvier. I will not repeat what they mentioned already. My presentation will be more about food security and climate change. First, I would like to say that climate change, the climate is changing, and the climate has some effect and impact already in Haiti for the last 10 years. It's not something that will happen, it is something that is happening already. First, we realize that in terms of the statistics that we have, the data, in terms of hurricane, storm, etc., it happened during a period it used to happen every 7 to 10 years. At a certain point, it happened every 2 to 3 years. In terms of drought, in some area it used to be every 7 or 8 years. Now it's every 2 to 3 years as well. And abnormally, right now, we didn't have any meteorological phenomenon during the last 18 months. And this year, we will expect a big one. And I don't think that the country is ready for that. In terms of, in order to tackle this situation, one of our partners, Elizabeth Pereiro, mentioned that we need to be climate change resilience. Climate resilience, according to her, must be considered in multidimensionality, from the development of technical capacity in order to face the challenge of sustainable energy, to the construction of a healthy social structure, strengthened by values such as solidarity, respect, and mutual recognition. I think all those values healthcare, and Marina mentioned that in the presentation. I will not go further. In terms of effect and impact on climate change in Haiti, I think before it was predictable. Farmers would know when it will rain, when they could plant, when they will harvest. I think the situation has changed for the last 10 years. It is becoming more unpredictable. And for example, when you have a poor farmer that couldn't buy the seed at the right time, and the rain is coming just like that, they are not prepared. At the end, as Marina mentioned, we have the harvests are really low because they plant not at the right time. This happened because of the reglementation, I would say, of the climate. In Haiti, the starting food are rice and beans, but people are having chicken and eggs as well. In terms of food security, it is really important for people to have the rice. But as Mark mentioned, rice situation in Haiti, we have enough land with the right characteristic to produce enough rice for whole Haiti and export. But we had two structural adjustments, one in 1986 and the other one in 1994-95, that prevent the Haitian government to invest in agriculture. All the governments, even the USAID, prevent Haiti to invest in agriculture. Because of that, we have 800,000 people that lost their job. What they used to do, they lost it. That would mean if you put 800,000 people multiplied by 4 to have a household, it is around it's more than 3 billion people that died in poverty in Haiti by 2014. And what happened, because of the structural adjustment, some of the big agencies, structural agencies, say that we will support Haiti to have a better economy, to invest better in agriculture. But because of this structural adjustment, we open, how can I say that? The custom, we could import everything at a low price. As Mark mentioned, we used to have a tax on rice over 35%. It reduced to 3, even 0%. Why now? Maybe you don't know that. We are exporting rice to the Dominican Republic. How come? We are importing rice from the US, from Arkansas, thanks to President Clinton, and they smuggle the rice to the Dominican Republic because the tax there is about 20%. Just to let you know that no investment in agriculture for the last for more than 20 years. They are starting now for the last 5 years, but not at the space that Haiti did this kind of investment. Right now, in terms of the population at risk of food insecurity, we have the northwest, we have the north part of the Artibonite, we have the west and the southeast of Haiti. I think the situation is very critical as we are speaking. It's more than 1.5 million people living in food insecurity in those areas. And most of the time, women and children are the most vulnerable. And we could say that 70% of this information for the 1.5 million are women and children. And I think it is really critical. Yes, we do have good big projects on food insecurity and climate change. Among those projects, I would like to mention a few. The state has what we call the PANA. It is the National Plan for Adaptation Plan for Climate Change. But the issue is, at the state, we have only one person working on climate change. And is working 50% of his time on climate change. That's what means they don't have the right capacity to handle the situation. Right now with the DPC, the Direction of Protection Civil, working on disaster prevention and response, they are including climate change within their agenda. And the next one will be ready at the end of this month, and it will be for the next 10 years, and climate change will be taken into consideration. And all this work has been done for the DPC to include climate change because of some work of some civil society organizations. There is a platform of NGO or civil society organization in Haiti from 8 to 12 organizations, with a leading organization called Service Chrétien Haiti, with support from ACK Alliance that I used to share. They had a platform that is pushing the state, and it's not the way that we are doing advocacy here. It's a more friendly approach in order to support them to do things. For example, when Haiti is supposed to attend the Lima Convention, this group worked a lot for the state, and they changed a few bit of it, and they went to the convention. It is a way that, because they don't have really the capacity, it's like one person half of this time on climate change is not enough. I think this platform is doing a very good job, and they will be in Paris to present the declaration, the Haitian declaration with the Haitian government. This organization, the first thing about climate change is about sensitization, because most of the people don't know what is climate change, what is climate change adaptation, because they say, oh, it is some northern country cooling our life with, dioxide, carbon, etc., but they didn't understand how it is affecting them, why, etc. That is why this platform is doing this kind of work, working with the media first, grassroots media, mainstream media, people from the government, teachers, religious leaders, in order to teach them about how to understand climate change and how to address it. They are doing a study on how gender inequality and energy connect those three elements in Haiti, because there is a big effort on gender. This situation, this unpredictable situation that climate change came with in Haiti. In terms of big challenges, I would say that right now Haiti don't have the capacity to move forward, to adapt very well to this situation now. It is a real challenge, and we are discussing about it. And in terms of agriculture, production of food, it is some organizations are trying to take two main projects like eggs, dairy projects, rice, for example. For rice, it is going quite well because the land are there, the people are. They know how to do the work. In terms of eggs, we have a big competitor, the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic is exporting 1.2 million eggs a day to Haiti. And right now, they invest a lot during 20 years, but they invest a lot. They lost money for 5 years. It is the same for that Haiti need. But the government don't have the right money to do so. In terms of kind of the work, there are studies done, feasibility studies in progress in order to see how we can invest more in a more semi-industrial way and industrial way in eggs in Haiti in order to have farmers and women to get access to this produce and sell it in the market. In terms of challenges, I would say energy. Yes, we know because of the climate changing, sometimes you have a lot of rain, and the rain is really heavy. And when I say heavy, really heavy rain at some period of the time. And most of the time, as you know, I mentioned that earlier, people are using charcoal and firewood. And we have less than 2% of the forest now. It used to be 10% 25 years ago. It is a real issue. When you have heavy rain, it is coming to the cities, and you can see the damage that this could happen. And the charcoal business is more than $50 million business a year. That means it is a lot. That's Haiti need to have a renewable, another way to find energy for the population in order to see this. It is an indirect effect of climate change. And as you know, energy is not a commodity. Energy is rather a human rights issue. People need to have the right energy. But why now? It's not they don't want. They don't want to cut the trees, but sometimes they don't have any alternatives. And we as NGO, we have the moral responsibilities to support in studies, etc., with universities to see how we could help change the set of mind, particularly first at the political level, because right now there is no political will to address this kind of issue. Do you think that it is planting trees, stapling, it is a solution? No. It is to find a way to shift from charcoal and have other type of energy for cooking and doing other things. If I have a few recommendations, I would say that all resilient livelihood projects that supposed to have in Haiti, they need to take into consideration some adaptation element to climate change, even construction. I saw, for example, the Olympic Stadium. They built that in a little valley. When it is raining a lot, it is flooded. We need to think about it. And I think in the future of your organization, even the US organization, they need to think about this, because I know that some project has been done with big money in area where they don't used to have, those areas were not flooded in the past, but now starting to be flooded. But we need to take that into consideration. First, take adaptation element within always in the livelihood program. The second bit is as the farmers don't have the good information about the climate, it will be good to have a right system, the meteorological system, meteorological system.
Weather information.
Weather information available for the farmers in order that they could have the right information in order to know where, when, and how to plant. That's simple. And on the other hand, I won't be wrong, there will be an obligation for the rich country to reduce the dioxide emission. I think here at the Hill, I will voice up what the platform in Haiti would like to say to the people that are taking decisions. The reduction is fatal for people. It is killing other people. It is putting people in a very vulnerable situation, and that is bad. And they need more obligation in order to reduce the dioxide emission. The second one thing I would say in terms of obligation again, they need to. It is their obligation right now to provide the finance, the technology, and the capacity building support to some developing country, because it's not about helping the country. It is during the last 10 years, a country like Haiti was victims of the development of other countries, and it will be good that they could pay some of the consequences in terms of financing, the technology, and the capacity building support. And I would like, on the name of the platform again, to say no to carbon market, because the carbon market is not the good solution to resolve the climate change issue that a country like Haiti is facing. It's not the solution at all. And I will urge people from here, from the Hill, you organization working on climate change, to push that forward, that some organization in Haiti think the carbon market are not the answer to the problem. And further financing, the right technology and capacity building is the right support that they need to build back better. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Prosper. So as you've cast this, and as we also like to do in Oxfam, it's a question of climate justice. Very interesting story told by former ambassador of Haiti to the United States right after the earthquake. So the electricity generation obviously stopped in Port-au-Prince, but yet the traffic lights were still operating. And why is that? Because they were solar powered. So Haiti has a very excellent source of energy in that yellow thing up in the sky, and there's plenty of wind too. So there are alternatives, but the issue of charcoal is complex because if you deprive people of agricultural livelihoods, making charcoal is a way to earn income. It's not just a source of energy. And so having alternative livelihoods, alternative employment is also very important. Being able to make a living as a farmer, for example. And I think both Prosperi and Marie-Ange talked about adaptation. So very little irrigation in Haiti, mainly in the Artibonite Valley, and there is some small irrigation systems in both the northeast and the southwest, but most agriculture is rain-fed. So if you're a farmer and the rains always came in March and now they're coming in May, imagine what it's like. You can't plan, you don't know when to plant, and it's very difficult. Irrigation, and it can be on a small scale, it doesn't have to be huge dams, offers one way to adapt to the changing patterns of rainfall. Well, we do have a few minutes before lunch. I don't want to deprive you, as I said at the beginning, too much of your own food security, but open it up to the floor. Yes, sir.
Well,
And could you tell us who you are?
yeah, my name is Matthias Medina. I'm independent right now, and I was in Artibonite in 2008, 2009 after the cyclones. Well, first of all, it's I see that the speech of people has not evolved a lot. It's still very problems in rural areas of access to whatever the land needs with seeds and fertilizing and all that stuff, and also the lack of ways to get out the production to the town, to the market, because everyone knows that we don't eat only tomatoes and eggplants. So if you have tomatoes and eggplants, you need also to buy something. And I've seen in Haiti tomatoes rotting on the side of the fields because we can't take them out. So, for example, fields that are 6 hours by donkey from town, they won't reach it. You can't extract in the back of a donkey all your production. So it's every day you're going to go, and at some point it's going to just rot. So, in what's been said, I see we need from one side this long-term approach. I mean, build a road, for example. But in agriculture, everything takes cycle after cycle. So building a road will maybe a little bit make things better for next year, but then it's very little every year. So, and from another side, we need immediate response. And how do you work with people who are in that need, and also people who most of the time are also a little bit stubborn in the countryside. I mean, work with farmers all around the world, and it's something that's it's not common. But I don't know. It's maybe a comment, question. What?
Thank you. Why don't we take a couple of questions or comments, and then I'll come back to the panelists.
Yes.
And tell us who you are.
Sure. Thank you very much for your presentations. My name is Luis Cabrales. I am with Action Aid USA. My question, when speaking of food insecurity, have you seen at all any impacts from biofuels or biofuel intended crops on food security in Haiti?
We're thinking of jatropha, for example, which is indigenous to Haiti. Okay. And take one more, ma'am.
Yes, I'm Megan Fletcher from the Inter-American Foundation. And I'm curious how the men in the community are responding to the women who are getting more involved, taking charge of their agricultural production, and having a more active role in the community where Marie-Ange is working.
So, if I can summarize the three questions quickly. So the first one is sort of balancing short-term and long-term, if I'm not doing too much violence. The second one on biofuels, is that undermining food
The
security?
interpreter doesn't know biofuel in
Oh.
Creole. Can someone help us with biofuel?
Biocarburant. That's French, anyway. And the last question was specifically for Marie-Ange. So how do the men feel about empowering women?
We always say in society, two strengths, two forces.
Gen force man la avec force femelle la.
There's the male and the female force.
Jounen jodi a nou di ke yon pil evolusyon ki fet.
Now we say today there's been a lot of evolution.
Kote mesdames yo même yo participer dans vle nan kote ekonomi nan kaya.
And now we see that women are participating much more in the economy of the home.
D'ailleurs, monsieur dit deux mecs pas fruits, c'est ça c'est un deux mecs. Peut-être qui se lit
That's what the men say.
Ça veut dire si c'est moi-même seulement, je ne veux dire l'autre te contradiction côté mesdames de chita dans caille, monsieur al travail côté bayo.
So in the traditional way, the women were staying at home and the men would go out and they would bring things to them.
Mais je ne veux dire rôle le plus joué des garçons al travail au contraire pour côté moi-même.
Depuis.
Je ne veux dire le plus de tendance tant dans mes filles
So
d'ailleurs.
now they're waiting for the women to bring things home.
D'ailleurs, monsieur Kounia c'est femme qui travaille, il a besoin de comprendre.
So now they have a woman who works and they need her to do that.
Kounia n'a regardé qui aspect dans la société qui dans ça, oui, je ne veux dire les femmes qui travaillent.
So let's look at what happens in society today while now the women are working more.
Les moi pas dépendre au monde, moi senti un grand monde et me faire sembler avec lui.
So when I'm not dependent on someone, I feel more like an adult and I'm more independent in my life.
Moi libre pour mal participer par exemple dans une réunion ou bien dans n'importe qui bagaille l'aime libre.
And whenever I want to, I go out to participate in a meeting or in some other activity that I want to do.
Moi libre pour m'envoyer petit moi l'école.
And I'm free to send my children to school.
Les ça diminue un petit crasse taux violence parce que c'est pas ou même capable maman, moi même moi capable de tuer.
So that does reduce a bit the violence that women live with because they are more free to go out and do what it is that they want to do.
De jour en jour, mesdames, je sens plus fiers parce que yo même tout yo participer dans le développement pays.
And women feel proud each day a little bit more of their own participation in the development of their country.
C'est un pas dans droit la pracher yo.
So this is just one step in the rights that we are taking back.
Depuis longtemps, femmes étaient dans l'agriculture, mais cependant, what yo te compte jouer, c'est à récolter travail côté comme la baille monsieur.
So the role that women had in the past was that they would go out and harvest their crops and then the money would be given to the man.
Je ne veux dire ça a commencé à changer.
But now today that's changing.
Et c'est ça qui fait, monsieur, tout, vous avez tendance pour dire, mesdames, il semblait qu'il y a une organisation calégée yo.
So now it seems like these organizations are opening the eyes of these women.
Mesdames, yo connaît que, je ne veux dire, yo capable de faire bio pour continuer dans le monde.
And now women see that they can make their own lives and on their own, and they don't have to count on other people.
Et nous pensons effort ça fait grâce à travail organisation pour les femmes yo, ou c'est un montant pour tout le monde, peut-être ça pas supposé subir violence l'été parce que pas oublier mesdames yo, c'est eux même qui plus que dans caille, mais longtemps je t'ai bien tendance dire en même temps moi côté bas, je veux dire j'ai ouvert avec quelque ça.
So women's eyes have been open with the work of these organizations that have worked with women and helped them to understand that they don't have to wait for somebody else to bring things to them, that they can take their own initiatives.
Mais ça pas empêcher qu'il y ait des garçons qui pas contents.
But it's also true that there are men who are not happy with these things.
Parce que il y a un travail de mentalité pour nous faire avec eux qui peut corriger.
So there is some work in their mentality that we're working on with them, but it's not quite there yet.
Changer une culture, c'est pas un bagage qui passe.
Changing culture is not an easy thing.
Mais je veux dire, je crois que femmes représentent une force et il faut qu'ils même ça.
But today they believe that women are force and they need to struggle together with them.
Laisse ça dans une société qui avance.
And then our society can advance. I think I missed a point that she said that was, excuse me, important. I think I missed that she said violence has in some cases diminished, domestic violence, because of women having more strength. So I'm sorry I missed that.
Oui, alors, excusez-moi. Et pendant Sylvia fait apport de violence qui diminue, et très souvent, moi, me demandé, est-ce que la violence diminue ou bien, je ne veux dire, plus de monde dénonce, plus de monde porte plainte.
Sometimes we're wondering, is it violence that is diminished, or is it just that more women are now coming forward to complain about the violence that they are experiencing?
Oui, et parce que c'est vrai, il y a un système, tendance qui était gagné avant, je veux dire, nous dit déjà, le but, organisation a mené fait que il y a des bagages qui changent.
So the tendency is we have to struggle when we say things are changing.
Il y a un pile barrière toujours, parce que dans le pays, nous avons un système de justice qui corrompu.
There is still many obstacles. In our country, we have a justice system that is corrupt.
Nous avons pile loi qui était votée par monsieur Yo, que je vous ai dit depuis 1843, que nous avons servi avec eux toujours.
There are some laws that are in our system that the men voted in, and since 1942, and these are still part of our system.
Nous avons pile barrière, donc pour pas pour nous aller prendre un avocat qui l'a toujours pile de barrières qui empêchent nous aller nous joindre justice.
Another important barrier to justice is that we have to be able to pay. We don't have money to pay an attorney to go and take a case to court.
Nous avons pile institutions qui a crasé nous, tant pour par exemple l'Église, moi pointé mauvais, pointé du doigt, qui je veux dire a parlé de soumission de la femme.
So we have many other institutions that are really pushing us down. I'm sorry to have to say that the church is one of these organizations that just, even until today, is teaching that women have to be submitted.
Mais ça pas empêcher qu'il y ait de grands efforts qui fait et qu'il y ait de grands et donc à parler de succès quand même en mouvement féminin.
But it's not it's not a small thing, and we can say today that there has been much progress in some of these movements and in the whole area of the progress of women and women's strength.
Il était pour nous faire pression pour famille participer dans tout côté décision à prendre.
We are continuing to struggle to give women participation in all of the places where decisions are taken. Decisions are made.
Et ceci dans tout secteur.
And in every sector this is the case.
Et c'est ça garder dans ça garder l'agriculture, dans ça garder question terre, dans ça garder question manger, faut que famille là tout pour dire qui j'en yo vle yo même pour yo récolter, qui j'en yo vle pour yo planter et qui j'en yo vle pour vendre marché, qui qualité marché.
So in all of these areas, in the question of land tenure and markets and agricultural work, women need to be there at the level of decision making to say how and what they want to plant, how and where they will go to the markets, to market what they produce.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Marianne. I would like to add, I think what Marianne mentioned is really important. Based on my experience in Haiti, I think empowered women are really key for the development of Haiti. And I think that their leadership in all projects that I'm supervising, etc., I realize with women leadership, we have more transparency, and we have more impact with them. And even some of my staff think that to pull Haiti out of the situation, we need a series of women leaders to lead us to prosperity. And I think that in our work, in a lot of work of civil society organizations in Haiti, we realize there are some progress, but still more to be done. Particularly, we are working with progressive churches in order to help them change the set of mind and help the women and men to change their set of mind, work together, and be more prosperous. There is one question. Impact biofuel. I don't have much information about the biofuel, but I work with a company on the Chateaufa, but it didn't work. The result that what they wanted to get in terms of result, they didn't manage to reach it. First, because of no political will, they have a lot of barriers to import the right material. They are asking them a lot of money at the custom, even if it is experimental, even if it is at the university There's still a lot of work to be done at this level. But right now, we have mentioned biofuel, we are trying moringa now. Another subject, the moringa. And we are investing a lot in this because you have a lot of moringa in Haiti. People are eating the leaves, the oil, we are using it, and we are using it as energy at home. At this level, it is where we are. Maybe another experience in Haiti as well is the biofuel. It's biogas. No, sorry, biogas, biofuel. Yeah, there are some organizations that are working within the school. The school has a canteen. They are using, the toilet, to produce the gas in order to. Yeah, I think it's happening. It is experimental. It's not experimental. It's over 40 units working, and I think there is one of our partner organizations now, churches from Norway. They're experimenting that and using the waste of the food for fertilization, compost, etc.
But it's not a trade-off with food security because they use that in the garden,
Yes.
and then the gas is a fuel. So it's not like corn corn ethanol in the U.S. It's the food aspect is also supported as well as.
Short term, long term.
Nice.
Yes.
Il est vrai que c'est pas la même chose que le maïs.
It's
Cependant,
not the same thing as corn, but
tendance pour nous aller vers même ça qui est passé après dans les années 70, dans le début des 20e siècle. Quand on parle utiliser des territoires qui ont produit manger, des produits, et produit par exemple, quand on produit du tisane, vous voyez là-bas. Donc ça, c'est qu'on a tendance encore à éviter. C'est vrai, c'est pas maïs qu'on a mangé, mais c'est terre pour faire manger, qu'on peut utiliser pour faire de. Donc ça, c'est nous. Comment trouver le plus bon moyen, comment naviguer en besoin pour ne pas couper le bois, pour utiliser notre source d'énergie, et tout en même temps qu'il y ait droit pour garantir souveraineté alimentaire ou sécurité alimentaire, si on veut faire plaisir à tendance campée de là. Donc, moi, quoi, ça c'est là aussi on point à signaler tout ça.
another point that I would raise, yes, it's not the same thing as the corn, but I'm not sure I got all of that.
There's still a risk of a trade-off between food that can be consumed and something that's used for energy. There's still a risk.
Planting cattle fry instead of planting food for consumption.
And it's the idea that you're actually displacing land for food production and you're planting biofuels for that. So this is something that Haiti has already experienced with sisal and with other biofuel products that were destined for export markets. We don't want the earthquake to provide opportunity for the same trend we have to be open.
But what Prosperity was talking about is this sort of dual use of human waste, where you're producing methane for fuel, and then also it can be used to fertilize the vegetable garden. So it's, as we say, dual use technology. Did Chef want to jump in also?
So, question la Tibonite.
The question that you raised about the Artibonite Valley.
Actuellement, dans la Tibonite, on y a là,
Right now, in the Artibonite Valley,
USAID ont un bon projet qui a fait sur route agricole.
USAID has a nice project that they're doing with agricultural roads.
Le projet ça santé exactement sont pas à Tibonite avec le bâtiment dans le Sahara.
And this project is operating in the lower part of the Artibonite Valley and also in the Plateau Central, the Central Plateau.
Et son projet est très intéressant.
Very interesting project.
Simplement, il a ça qu'a posé un nom pour ça, c'est suivi.
But the problem that we're concerned about in this project is follow-up.
Parce que l'on fait route agricole là,
So when you start making these agricultural roads,
sauf pour voir peut-être qu'il y a côté route là pas arriver.
so there's some places where the roads actually can't get to.
Faut toujours une continuité dans le projet ça qui vous permet de bouger la route.
So you have to have some kind of continuity with this project for it to be successful.
C'est vrai que ça.
And that's the danger.
Mais son bel projet.
Very, very nice project.
Nan san sa nou komanse avanse nan sa kesyon route agricole.
So that's where I'm working on.
Pou ti manje nou fè nan moun, yo pa gate anko.
Because we don't want all of that good food that's grown up there on the hills to just rot.
You mentioned short term and long term. I think because of the structural adjustment document, they prevent Haiti from any plan on agriculture for more than 20 years. And I think even though we had this policy, some organizations, civil society, etc., they managed to have a plan from 2008 to 2017. But because of the earthquake, this plan didn't receive all the most attention that they're supposed to get. Right now, yes, they are pouring a lot of money within the agriculture. I think it is good, but at the same time, it will be great, even for partner, we are working on that, to discuss about where we are going. Why? Because some of the support that we receive are not really interesting. Because based on the report from our partner, I can confirm, some agencies, instead of proposing good seeds, they propose good seeds, but they are OMG.
Oh, genetically modified.
Or OMG. And I think that could create more problem in the future. I knew that one organization that we used to work with burned this OMG in the past, etc. But it is this issue that we are facing now. Yes, there are some investment, but while supporting us in an emergency, they are giving you the seeds. Yes, you want to take the seeds. Without further control, we might end up having what we don't really need. And that is why, right now, in terms of long term, the plan is until 2017-18. I'm sure that they will work on another plan in the future. Because agriculture, even if we could find rice all over the world, etc., in Haiti is really important, as Chef mentioned. It is a thing that a lot of people, even have 50% of the population, used to do. It is where they enjoy doing. And it is where they catch their solidarity movement, their rara, their community, etc. I think it's really important to still have it, but to do it in a smarter way, in order that the land could produce enough for them to feed them, to feed their family, and to get enough money to send them to school and study, etc. In terms of long term, there is no real fund, long-term development fund for agriculture in Haiti. Most of the work that we are doing in agriculture in Haiti now, we are using emergency fund. That is why Chef is insisting that it is a short-term project, but afterwards there will be some difficulty to do the right monitoring, the right follow-up of this project, making sure that what they put in place, the government or the local authority will have the right capacity to handle the situation and make it work.
But as you said in your comment and question, so if there's no harvest, the short-term question is very important for farmers, as well as the long-term question like maintaining the existing irrigation system, which has very serious maintenance problems. So this is always, I think, as you said, a problem in agriculture, and not just in Haiti, but globally. I think we're out of time. That is, if you want to eat lunch. I can't promise you that we have nice Haitian rice and goat, but there is food. Kawit.
Thanks for
The food